Welcome, and thank you all for joining us. I'm Amanda Leschuk, Director of College and Career Counseling, and I would like to thank Emily Colby. She is, I don't know where to start. She's our librarian, our media specialist, our tech guru. She kind of does everything. So she is helping us out this evening with technology, definitely. And of course, I'd like to thank the Marymount School Foundation for sponsoring our Life in Leadership series. We certainly couldn't bring this kind of programming to our Marymount community without the support of the foundation. Just a quick note on that. Having a speaker like this really is unique if you didn't know that. Sometimes I'll be out with different school counseling colleagues at other schools, even including private schools, and I'll talk to them about our speaker series, and they really don't have these kinds of opportunities at other schools. So again, thank you to the foundation and to all of our donors. Your generosity does not go unnoticed. We really appreciate it. Our speaker tonight is Peter vanbuskirk, who's a 25-year veteran of college admission and the founder and CEO of Best College Fit. I think you'll appreciate his high energy and knowledge regarding the college admission process, especially in this era of COVID-19. It was interesting this spring I received an email from one of the college organizations where I'm involved, and it was about Peter's new project, which included him interviewing 20 deans of admission across the country just to talk to him about how they were handling. Yep, that's Peter. Of course he is. That's the kind of research he does. He goes straight to the source. He wants the most up-to-date and accurate information, and he pretty much knows everybody, so it usually works out for him. Peter's presentation tonight, College Admission in the Era of COVID-19, draws upon insights from those conversations as well as his own experiences as Dean of Admission. He will discuss the implications for admission as selective institutions are forced to reimagine their selection processes given the disruptions to classroom instruction, testing, and opportunities for non-academic pursuits. Peter has also given us permission to record the presentation tonight, and we will make it available in the next week or so. Feel free to add questions in the chat feature, and Peter will take a break from time to time to answer those questions throughout our presentation. So Peter, welcome, and thank you for presenting for us tonight.
Well, it's great to be with you. I'm really sad that I can't be with you live in your auditorium to meet all the families and to see students as well. But this is a good follow-up or next best effort for us. But good to be with you tonight to talk about the college admission process in this most unusual year of college admission. What I'd like to do is kind of lead us through a conversation tonight that will help you understand how you can get from where you are to where you want to be. And we're talking now about the student, and the student is the key person here. I know moms and dads have been working on this project for a long time, but now it's time for the student to step up and to help to start navigating this process. Before we get into some of the key elements of change that I believe are noteworthy this year, what I want to do is establish a conversation about some of the fundamentals. But let's first talk about navigating the changing pathway, and I want to let you know what we're going to be getting into later. There are 4 areas of change institutionally that are going to impact students in the college admission, both the college search and selection process and the admission process that we're going to talk about. Then we're going to, but before we do that, we'll talk about the kids. So here we go. These are the topics we're going to talk to jump into. First is the instruction. As you well know, things have changed for students in the classroom at Marymount. They've changed in the classroom on college and university campuses. We're going to take a look at also the changes that are taking place in campus access. It's very difficult now to imagine that you can have access to a college campus anywhere, and where it is taking place, very limited in terms of the access that you would get. We're going to talk about changes in assessment of credentials in the admission process, and some big things happening there. Particularly with testing and how colleges and universities are looking at the students' records in this very unusual year. And then finally, we're going to take a look at how there are changes in financing for college as well. This is the one, as a parent of three college now graduates, that is very sensitive for me, because one of the things that I never wanted to deal with were surprises, and the kind of surprise that greets a mom or a dad when you find that the amount you budgeted for college isn't exactly what they're asking for right now. So we're going to talk about all four of these areas, but first I want to really zero in on the importance of making the student a part of this process. So the navigational guide is going to focus about our own, the students. So I hope there's some students watching tonight, because again, mom and dad, you've been there, done it, and this is for and about your student. And as you well know, if you need to convey the things that I'm talking to you about tonight to your student, they'll say, yeah, Dad, I know that, or I've been there, done that. So I understand. So we want to make the process about the student. We want to stay centered on purpose, and we want to focus on finding fit. These are two elements that in all the years I've been involved with college admission, now 40 years overall, I'm finding even more so that purpose is something that's easily overlooked by students, and fit is not considered as fully as it might be. So let's take a look further at both of these areas. Purpose. I ask students all the time, why do you want to go to college? In fact, I'm going to ask that question again tonight. I asked a student the other day, why do you want to go to college? And she looked at me strangely like, why? Is this some sort of a trick question? No, it's not a trick question. Why do you want to go to college? Well, doesn't everybody go to college? If I don't go to college, I'm going to be left behind. And I reminded her that not everybody went to college. And even if they did, would that really be a good answer for you? And she said, well, you don't know my parents. They're going to make me go to college. I don't have a choice in the matter. How about that? And if there's students listening right now, how's that working for you? I mean, how do you feel about doing something for 4 years of your life because somebody says you're going to do it, rather than doing it because you want to? In life, wouldn't you much rather choose the things that you do as opposed to have them mandated for you? So let's start with that. Why do you want to go to college? It isn't a trick question. It is something you're going to have to deal with. And as you begin to wrestle with this question, you'll start to develop a sense of purpose. That purpose that reveals direction, that reveals focus, reveals priorities, will help you discover the colleges that make sense to you, and it will help you put together a more meaningful application to those colleges when it's time to apply. So why do you want to go to college? Now, I want to add a further explanation here. And mom and dad, bear with me for a moment. Students, you don't have to go to college. You may have noticed there's no law, no rule that says you've got to go to college. You can graduate from Marymount and get a job. You can travel, see the world. You can do volunteer things in the community. You can hang out at home and watch Netflix all day. Not a good idea. We're not going to really focus on that. But my point is this: for each one of you, college needs to be a considered choice. You need to understand where education fits in your life and what it can do for you over the long haul. Don't let college become the default option for you. Know why you want to go. Find that sense of purpose in that choice. The next thing I want you to think about is, what do you want to achieve when you go to college? Let's think about this. What are 3 things you want to achieve when you go to college? I asked my son this because my son was really laid back. And you had to check his pulse, even in his senior year, to see if there was anything college coursing through his veins. It made me nervous because I was dean of admission at the time, and the clock was running in my head. So one day I said to my son, you really going to go to college? And he kind of nodded. Yeah. I said, well, what is it you want to get out of college? What is it you want to achieve? He paused, and he said, well, I want to get a good education. I can't tell you how delighted I was to hear that. I wasn't sure that was on his radar screen at all. And then I didn't want to lose the moment. So I proceeded. I said, well, help me understand, what will a good education look like for you? When you're in the midst of your 4 years, what's that good education going to be doing for you? What's the dynamic of a good education for you? And moms and dads, ask this of your student, because they don't really think about what a good education will look like. They just know it's fashionable to say, I want to get a good education. So my son thought about it some more. He said, well, I want to go someplace where I can learn lots of stuff. Okay, I'll buy that. He said, I want to go someplace where I can ask questions. I want the professors to know my name. I want to feel like I'm part of what's going on at that school. You understand what he's beginning to do? He's beginning to give some definition to the kind of learning environment that would make sense to him. And then he said, I want to go someplace where I can study chemistry. I really like that, I gotta say. I said, do you want to learn about chemistry in the lecture hall? Find the largest lecture hall you've seen, fill it with students, and teach chemistry. It happens that way on many university campuses every day. Or I said, do you want to learn about chemistry in the laboratory? Oh, no, Dad. He said, I want to go someplace where we can pour the chemicals and stir things up. I want to see what happens next. And a lot of students out there feel the same way about learning. I mean, you spend your days watching, listening, absorbing information, just waiting for that opportunity to stir things up, to see what will happen next. And then finally he said, I want to go someplace where I can play my trumpet. Now he could have said, I want to play ball, join a club, study abroad, a lot of things, but today it was the trumpet, and he really is a good trumpet player. He wasn't ready, he wasn't looking for a conservatory, but he wasn't ready to quit. He wanted a band, an orchestra, an opportunity to keep playing his trumpet. I want you to think about what just happened, though, in that very short conversation. For the first time in his 17 years, this young man had heard an articulation of his priorities. And the revelation to him was this: that articulation was not coming from the old man. He was hearing from his own lips the I want statements that began to give focus and direction to his thinking about college. He realized in that conversation that this really wasn't about Dad, it was about him. And this was empowering for him because it changed the way he began to think about ownership. It was his process, not mine. So when you think about what you want to achieve, see where it takes you in terms of finding your purpose in more definitive ways. So the third thing I want you to think about is how can you best accomplish your goals? And we're going to tease this out a little bit more in a moment, but I just want to say that college education isn't the same everywhere. College campuses are not the same. The people you meet are not the same. The missions of institutions are not the same. So when you have a sense of purpose, your purpose will lead you to those places that are going to best accommodate you as you set out to achieve your goals. This is really important. And I'll add this thought. A lot of the very selective schools right now are focusing on this concept of purpose, of intentionality, as they make decisions about whom to admit. They're looking at a ton of very talented candidates. They can't take them all. They can't even take a fraction of them. What they're really looking for is evidence that the student who's applied knows what she wants, how she wants it, and has identified that institution as one that is uniquely positioned to deliver for her, not because of a reputation or a ranking, but because of what that program offers that will help her achieve her goals. This is where purpose makes a big difference. And if our kids can approach the process with a sense of purpose, the outcomes will be much more rewarding for them. You find that purpose. Next up, you focus on colleges that will be good college fits. And I want to share with you now what I believe are 5 elements of a good college fit. The first is this: it'll be a program, offer a program that meets your academic needs. Now, this is pretty straightforward. It really is. You want biology, find a biology program. You want English, you find an English program. Engineering, you want an engineering program, find the engineering program. The reality is there are a lot of kids struggling to figure out what they want. And that's okay. It's seriously okay. 2/3 of college students in college will change their mind about their majors at least one time. Half of them will do it twice. So to be uncertain right now means that you're normal if you're one of those students who can't figure out what you want to do. The mistake many of you will make is this: you're going to start to fill out an application for a university. The application will say, tell us now, what is your major? We need to know now what your major will be. And you go to mom and dad and you say, what should I put here? I don't know what I want to do. My response is, why are you applying to the school? I mean, why would you apply to an institution that's forcing you to make a life decision before you're ready? It's not a good fit. There will be other places that will allow or encourage you to explore, to discover those directions before you make those commitments. Liberal arts colleges, general studies programs, they're viable alternatives. So the program to meet your academic needs might be one that gives you the opportunity to explore before you make commitments. Best College Free is going to be a place that provides a style of instruction consistent with the manner in which you like to engage in learning. Now, again, do we all process the same information the same way? You're all hearing my words, but you're all processing it through filters that are unique to you. Do you think all these colleges teach the same thing the same way? Maybe the same thing, but not the same way. And this is where it's really important for students to be discriminating in the way they look at colleges. Let's try some examples here. If you want to study history. Would you rather learn history in a lecture hall with 200 students listening to a professor talk about the book that you just read? Or would you rather be in a seminar room with the professor and 15 students talking about the book you just read? Same book, same content, different approach. If you're going to learn biology, would you rather learn biology from the book? You can do it. Or from the lab? Obviously an alternative. Same biology, different approach. You got to think about how you like to learn. One of the biggest reasons why students start at institutions and don't finish at institutions is because they misplace themselves. They put themselves in environments that are not suited to the way they like to learn. Here's another one I want you to think about. If you had an opportunity to get a grade for the whole year in any course, you name it course, and the teacher presents three options. The teacher says to get a grade for the whole year, you can take a test, content for the whole year, you can write a 20-page paper, or you can do an independent study project. What would you choose? Now, when I ask this question in groups of students, some students will say, I want to take the test. Why would you want to take the test? I'm good at tests. I like to be able to prepare. I manage the information. It works for me. Good stuff. Some students will say, I want to do the essay. I want to write the research paper. Why is that? I'm good at writing. I like to organize my thoughts around the presentation of materials. I can make good arguments that way. It's my style. It's what I do well. Good answer. And then there are going to be students who say, I want to do a project. And there'll be two types of responses here. Some students will say, well, I don't like to write papers and I'm not good at tests, so I guess I'm going to do the project. This is the default answer. And then there are going to be a lot of other students will say, I'm a creative person. I like to use other skills to help create a statement about what I've learned. They're all perfectly acceptable answers. But here's the deal. If you find yourself saying that I want to do the project, or maybe I want to do the essay, and you end up applying to a school and enrolling at a school that has 10, 15, 20,000 students, guess what you're not going to do? You're not going to do that project. You might do some essays and you'll do a lot of fill in the bubble tests. And if that's not your thing, get ready because you're going to do it a lot. I'm not suggesting that large schools are not good schools. I'm just saying they may not be best suited for how you like to learn. This is really important. Dig deep, understand how you like to learn. And then as you begin to look at colleges, make sure that the way they present information will be consistent with the way you like to learn. Next up, we want to take a look at a good fit being a college that provides a level of rigor that is commensurate with your ability and your preparation. This is pretty straightforward also. Throughout high school, at the end of each year, you prove yourself. You are then promoted from your freshman year to your sophomore year to your junior year and so on. You get to the end of the senior year. You're king of the hill. Okay, you've worked to this level of accomplishment. Are you going to choose a college that will challenge you at the same level of rigor? I hope not. That's like doing your senior year all over again, right? What you want to do is move to the next level of rigor, next step up. Now, some of you will want to do this. You'll want to get into one of those schools that's really hard to get into, and maybe you get in. And then for some of you, you'll spend 4 years trying to prove you belong rather than doing your best work. And some of you will finish high school at this level and you'll choose to go to this school. Hey, not a problem. It's not a problem for me. But I suspect it's largely because you're not concerned about the life of the mind. You want to go have a good time. But you know what? Your brain's going to rebel. After 2 or 3 years, your brain's going to say, hey, what about me? I can do this. You put me here. How about giving me a shot? You go home, talk to your parents about transferring, and you put yourself in an environment that will be more suitable for you. So this is important. And you know who can help you determine that next step up, what your capacity is to learn at another level? Your teachers. They're with you every day. They know your trajectory. They know the kind of environments in which you should be able to function seamlessly. And then you want to find a college that provides a sense of community that feels like home. Now, this is where a lot of students start. They've heard about a place that their friends go to, they like it, they've heard about it, its reputation, all kinds of stuff. The reality is it's important, but you can't let it drive the conversation. But here, I want you to think about it though. A lot of teenagers get to age 16, 17, 18 with an increased sense of independence. I got to get out of here. Everybody's in your business all the time. You want to be able to manage your own life, and freedom means going to college. Well, don't be surprised if At some point along the way, there's a little voice that starts to say things to you in your head. Like, they feed me, they give me a place to stay, I get to drive the car. My friends live right down the street. I have a pretty good life right where I am. Do I really have to go? Yeah. You can't live in your parents' home forever. And if college is that opportunity to break away, why not choose a place that feels like home? It will not be home. It will not include all your best friends from high school, but I'll guarantee you this, it will include people who become your best friends for life. And the other thing about finding that sense of community is this: you're going to be able to relax in your own skin. You don't have to be someone or something that you're not. And when you can be yourself, you'll be able to do a better job academically, because then you're not distracted. Find that place that feels like home. And then finally, the best college is going to be a place that values you for what you have to offer. If you forget everything else from this part of the presentation, don't forget this, because this is going to connect a lot of things we talk about later in the program. The college that values you for what you have to offer is a place that has seen what you've been doing in school, in life. They know your trajectory into the future. They simply want to be part of that trajectory for 4 years. They will admit you. They will give you the support you need or want financially. And they will demonstrate clearly to you how they will invest in your success. I hope that sounds good, because that's a sweet deal. You find a place that wants to invest in your success, you're going to do well. So find the fit. Once you find the fit, then the next objective is to find places that are going to subscribe to that notion of fit that is important to you. And I want to share with you a little bit now about the sort of the competitive landscape that you're going to encounter. This is a concept that I developed years ago when it became clear that in every audience there are students who have a range of aspirations. At Mariemont, there are students who want to go to big schools, to small schools, to research universities, to liberal arts colleges. Some of you want to go to really hard to get into schools, and some not so hard to get into schools. Tonight, we need to all talk regardless, and there's no judgment in where you want to go. So let's put all the schools in the country on this pyramid, not according to how good they are, but according to how hard it is to get in them. I hope you understand that distinction. If you spend any time in life trying to figure out which is the number one school, the number two school, you're going to go nuts. And I say that with conviction because there is no reliable metric that allows us to make those comparisons. And I know a lot of you probably have a hard copy of U.S. News and World Report ranking of colleges and universities, and you're thinking, well, they do it. Hey, if you like fiction, that's what you have. Rankings are fiction. They are not scientifically derived, they are fiction. Selectivity is going to be the basis for this model. It is measurable, and I'm going to explain that now. But imagine on this pyramid, the further up the pyramid, the harder it is to get into a college, the further up the pyramid you will find it, and the fewer schools that are quite that selective. So look at the top. A very small group might admit roughly 1 out of 8. A larger group might admit roughly 1 out of 4. Even more colleges admit roughly half, and most of the colleges and universities in this country admit most of the students who apply. Pyramid of selectivity. And yes, there is a very small group of schools at the point of the pyramid. Now, approximately 8 to 10 schools are admitting 5% of their applicants, 1 out of 20. I am not suggesting that they are the best. I don't believe it, but I'm telling you they're the hardest to get into. So what is the relevance of this pyramid? As the college admission process becomes real to you, you will have questions, and you may already have them, that sound like this. Well, how important is, and then you fill in the blank, how important is my senior year course selection? How important is my senior year performance? How important are my test results? How important is my summer activity? All the how important questions can be answered by the pyramid. It depends on where you think you want to go. You want to go to schools that are near the top of the pyramid? Everything's important. Everything, the stuff you've read about, the stuff you've heard about, and the stuff you've never heard about. It all counts. As you come down the pyramid, those schools see the same information that schools see at the top of the pyramid. They just attach different levels of importance to that information according to the pressure they feel to make fine distinctions between great candidates. A lot of pressure at the top of the pyramid, less and less as you come down the pyramid. So the pyramid of selectivity can be a useful tool to you as you begin to discern, what's really going to be in play credentially for you at different colleges and universities. So what is selectivity? Selectivity is defined by the enrollment model. And we can see on the enrollment model 3 elements that are important to me as an admission officer: applications, acceptances, and enrollment. The relationship between applications and acceptances is called selectivity. That's what helps you to understand where an institution might place on the pyramid. And you know what? It's easy to find that stuff. You can get these numbers about applications, acceptances, about selectivity. It's on college websites. It's in the literature. It's not hard to find. So as we look at this particular model, and you're thinking, well, this school will accept 2,000 students, but they have 8,000 applications, you might be tempted to say, Peter, aren't you guys going to look for the 2,000 good ones and let everybody else go? Won't it work like that? It would work like that if there are only 2,000 good ones. The reality is that at any school in the country, top to bottom, at any school in the country, most of the students who apply are going to be good. And by most, I'm not talking about 55, 60%. I'm talking about a pretty big number, like 90%. 90%. And if you're kind of blanching at that number, consider this. Just imagine the students who are listening or those who are being represented by parents. How many students in your community are going to be applying to institutions where if they're accepted and they enroll, how many of them expect to fail? Now, failure is always a possibility, but it should not be the plan. Most students applying to most schools go into this process with a sense of optimism, a sense of possibility, a sense that they belong. Now you know the numbers. In that group of 8,000, there are 7,200, give or take a handful. All of them belong in the accepted group. We can't take them. We can't take them. So I'd like to share with you another graphic that helps to illustrate what's going on here. Let's take the students who are good and put them on what I call the competitive playing field. Now, the competitive playing field is a concept that's in play for institutions around the country. This is the place where the students are who are good. Now, I want you to understand right off the bat, people like me, admission officers, can look at the whole group of students who are good, and we can organize them top to bottom in purely academic terms. For the point of this conversation, we're not talking about extracurricular activities, family connections. We're only thinking about brain power. So here we have students who will be for us at the top, Phi Beta Kappa, the dean's list, honor roll, the academic superstars. The other end of the spectrum, we have a group that might be JGB. You thinking about that? You know what JGB means? Just get by. Just get by. So at any school in the country, 90% of the students who apply will be between these 2 points. Students, when you choose to apply to a college, you must make sure that your academic credentials put you someplace on the playing field for that institution. And if so, you have hope. It's all you get, hope. I would strongly urge you to look at schools where your academic credentials will put you in the top half of their playing fields. To have hope, more hope. Again, that's all you get. And if you're thinking about schools at the top of the pyramid, on their playing fields, just to get started, get in the conversation, you need to be in the top quartile of their playing fields to have hope. Now, if you're wondering about hope, how do I know if I have hope? There's never any sure thing, but I'd like to share with you a really sort of primitive formula that could help. Okay, it involves test results. I'm sorry about that because I hate tests and I really hate what tests do to you. But colleges like tests. At the end of the day, colleges like to put tests out in their literature to show the world how smart the kids are that they just enroll. And that's not what tests measure anyhow, but that's the way colleges use it. So as you find a college that you like, go to the profile of information that they provide for the students who just enrolled. You'll find a lot of interesting data. You'll see GPA information. You'll see a distribution of test results. You'll see where the students come from. Go to that distribution of test results. Know what your super score is. You know what the super score is, don't you? Super score is going to be the best combination of your sub-test results for the SAT or the ACT. Look at that distribution of test results to see where your super score falls. Now, let's suppose you're looking at this particular school, a school that admits 1 out of 4. And maybe your super score falls right smack in the middle of that distribution. What does that mean about the probability of admission for you? They admit 1 out of 4, you're right in the middle. Now, the first inclination for a lot of people is to say, well, in the middle, isn't that 50-50? Those are my chances. I'm afraid not. My logic goes in a different way, and here it goes. If they admit 1 out of 4 and you're right in the middle, that means you look just like everybody else. Your chances are like everybody else, 1 out of 4. Your credentials are in the top quartile of their distribution. Your chances become better, 1 out of 2. Bottom quartile, not so good, 1 out of 8. You understand what I'm talking about here? This is not scientific. It's very intuitive, but it works. It can really help you find the right list of colleges to apply to. So let's come back to this model, and let's take a look at what we're considering here. If we're just admitting students, the top 2,000, I'm sorry, if we have 7,200 on this playing field and we know that we can admit 2,000, can we start at the top at the Phi Beta Kappa group and count down 2,000 and quit? You know what? State universities do that. Courses, grades, scores go into the formula in the computer spits out answers. Yes, no. That's the way it works. However, if you're applying to an honors college at a state university, or maybe an out-of-state state university, or any private college or university, they will look beyond the numbers. Why? Because there's some kids they don't want to miss. They don't want to miss this student who plays the cello beautifully, or this student who comes from a part of the country that is not represented on our campus that often. New Mexico, Roswell, New Mexico. This kid can put the ball in the net better than anybody in the Cincinnati metro area. Maybe the whole state of Ohio. A lot of points scored by this student. And this student comes from a family that can help us build our new library. And I promise you, this was part of my presentation before the Varsity Blues scandal developed a couple of years ago, because this has always been sort of an unspoken part of the admission process. Now, I want you to consider the students marked by the X. They have at least 3 things in common. Number 1, aren't they all good enough to be in play at this institution? They all can look at this place with a sense of possibility, sense of hope. I've got game for you guys. Give me a shot. I can get it done. But number 2, none of these 4 are going to be surefire admits for us, are they? It looks like one might be close to the top 2,000 academically, but even that one's not a slam dunk. But number 3, and this is the really important piece here, folks, each one of the students marked by the X might possess something that we as an institution value. You remember the good fit and that value proposition, find a place that values you for what you have to offer? Well, maybe we value performance in the arts. Today's your day. We got a place for you. Diversity is very important to us as we put together our student body. We want you on our campus. You can help us win championships. Coach has got that covered. Don't sweat a thing. Yeah, the library too. Maybe there's something to be worked out in the admission office if your family is making a commitment to the library. We're looking here at the intersection of the academic credential and the non-academic credential. Students, it will always be your academic credential that gets you into play. And for many of you, it will be the non-academic credential, one of those X's, if you will, the non-academic credential that might put you over the top. But I'll guarantee you this, if you're working wholeheartedly on a non-academic credential to the exclusion of your academic credential, you're not even on the playing field. You have no hope. So you got to take care of the academics first to put yourself in competition. Once you're in the competition, you end up in committee. The admission committee looks at your credentials. Now, the admission committee, a bunch of people like me. I'm not an academic. I'm not a professor. I'm hired to recruit and select the class. The people who have a very strong influence on the work that I do are the professors. And it shouldn't surprise you because they're the people who have experience with students in the classroom. They know what it takes to get the job done. So they're going to come to me with the agenda. Peter, bring us students who are bright. We know about those Phi Beta Kappa kids. We want them in our classroom. Bring us students who are motivated, students who love to learn, who are very dynamic in the classroom. Bring us students who are high achieving, students who know how to get the job done. Now, let's pause and think about that. I mean, this is the core definition of the academic success, right? But you know students who are obviously very bright, their levels of motivation kind of come and go, and their levels of achievement kind of come and go. For lack of a better word, we might call them underachievers. And if you're related to somebody like that, it might drive you a little bit nuts. I understand. I've been there, done that. But the message to the student is this, because there are a lot of students in high school who become real comfortable about where they are and what they're trying to accomplish. And college is just way out there. In fact, there may be some students tonight who are sophomores saying, why are you making me watch this? I'm only a sophomore. I'm not applying to college now. Or some juniors who are thinking, I'm still a year away from becoming a college applicant. What's in this for me? Listen, students, you need to know this. The day you started your freshman year of high school was the day you became a college applicant. You're in it already. And if you're waiting for that magic moment in time where you're going to flip a switch and show them what you've really got, you're wasting your time. And guess what? When you try to flip that switch, you can't go back and fix things you've already done. So hopefully you've been doing a really good job in the classroom. And hopefully you continue to do that, because the colleges that can be selective, that can be picky, want to see not only do you have it, but how do you use it? There's more. Professors want to see evidence of diversity. Now in our world, this is code, isn't it? For we want students of different ethnic background. Yeah, and that's very important. However, our professors are going to give us a broader definition of diversity. They're going to say, Peter, when we fill this class, let's bring in students who have differences, come from different backgrounds. Bring us students who have different ethnic backgrounds, but students who have different social and economic backgrounds, students who come from different spiritual orientations or different sexual orientations, different geographic backgrounds. Wow. When you think about diversity like that, broad strokes like that, you realize that each one of you has the capacity to bring some element of diversity to a college campus. You do. But that something doesn't fall out of the sky and hit me on the head. It's something you must know about yourself so that you can share that in your application. Now, there are two elements of diversity that are rarely, if ever, discussed that I'd like to add to the picture here. One is this. Every college and university in the country wants to make sure that each of its academic programs is populated. So, if you should have a sincere interest in an academic program that is underpopulated at a college or university, that can help you get in. Did you catch that? Sincere interest, underpopulated program can make the difference. There are going to be a lot of anthropology majors tomorrow. You got to be able to spell the word. It would be really helpful if you could have a thoughtful conversation about the subject. But I can assure you this, if in your application you can make the case that you have that kind of interest academically, that will help you get in. And finally, as I made this presentation several years ago, a mom put her hand up. She was in the audience, put her hand up. She said, Peter, I'm a college professor. And this discussion about diversity really is important to me and my colleagues. Would you remind them, she said, as she gestured to the students, would you remind them that we also value diversity of thought? Wow, what would diversity of thought look like? How could you measure that? I have come to the conclusion that diversity of thought is something that is found uniquely in each one of you. It's part of your DNA and it's part of your opportunity when you apply to college. Yes, diversity can be your friend in this process, but you must know where it lives in you in order to bring it out in your application. Finally, professors want givers. Now, the good news is this, you are all gifted, and you hear it all the time. People talk about how gifted you are as a musician or as an athlete, as a leader. And colleges want the gifted people. They want gifted leaders. They want gifted poets, presidents, volunteers, musicians, athletes, artists, people who have gifts of compassion for other people. They want that in their classroom. And while you're in school, you have the opportunity to discover those gifts, allow them to grow, so that when you apply for admission, you can reveal those gifts in your application. Again, let's take a look at what we've got here. You're applying to your favorite school. You've got these three things going on: bright, motivated, high achieving. Does that mean you're going to be admitted? Because academically, you're on the playing field, right? Maybe. It means that at some point, an admission officer will look at your credential and say this: we know he's good academically, he can do the work, but if we admit him, what do we get? What do we get? Again, it's the academic that gets the conversation started, and then the non-academic that brings it over the top. All right, Amanda, I'm going to pause here because I need to take a drink and I need to catch my breath. Are there any questions so far?
At this time, we don't have any questions. However, I have a question,
Sure.
just because I get this a lot from students. Again, in what's going on with COVID and everything, but students are sometimes wondering if the college is not going to, if they're test optional and I choose not to submit my test score, then is my essay more important? Or, how are they going to evaluate me without that test score?
And we're going to talk a little bit more about that coming up, but what many institutions are going to be forced to do is look more holistically at the applicant. And you may have heard about holistic admission. That means that it's the antithesis of the objective admission process. Objective means they look at the data only, just the data. Holistic means that they want to see, yes, the data, but also what's the student involved with? How does the student articulate herself? What are her extracurricular involvements, outside of school extracurricular involvements? How does she present the essays? What do people have to say about her? There are a lot of data points that are much more subjective that are going to intersect over the student in the process. And one of the critical data points is going to be the essay. And we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but it's my impression that the very selective schools are going to focus a lot on essays. And not just the common application essay, not just the general essay that everybody has to write. The more important essays that you're going to submit are going to be the essays that are responding to the supplemental prompts. Because as you get into the process, you're going to discover that many of the selective institutions will have 2 or 3 or 4, that many supplemental essay requirements. And some of them are going to sound like this. So why do you want to come here? Or tell us what you want to study and why. They're not essays designed to see if you can recite the superlatives of the school. Well, you've got a beautiful campus, amazing faculty, ranked, whatever. They know that. You know what they're looking for? It's going to go back to the beginning. They're looking for evidence that you are approaching this with a sense of purpose. They want to know what that purpose is. And they want to know that you found the synergy between what you want and what they have to offer. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along here, but it's a great question and something to keep in mind as we go forward. We all set?
That was helpful. And I think synergy is huge. I always think of this as the student finding the good fit, but it works both ways. I think the institution needs that good fit as well, like you were just saying. So
let's dance, okay? And they're looking for dance partners, and you're looking for dance partners, and they can be picky, and you can be picky. So finding that synergy is really important. Why don't we move on here? There's some more things coming up that I think you're going to find very interesting. Is we're going to start to dig into the changes and strategies that you can use to deal with some of the changes that are going to be pretty dominant in the college admission process in the next year or so. And let me pause on this. Students who are applying now, who are current seniors applying for the fall of 2021, this information is directly relevant to you. Directly relevant to you, because this is the reality. I'm going to try to define the reality we're dealing with right now. Students who are juniors, there's a good chance it's going to be the reality for you too. And I don't mean to say that in any kind of an intimidating way, but here's why I say this. Change on college campuses is historically glacial in nature. If you're watching to see changes on a normal basis, you won't see it, because colleges just don't change for the sake of changing. It doesn't happen. But over the last 6 months, that glacier that represents the institutional program has become a puddle. It has changed that dramatically, that quickly. And it's not likely that it's going to freeze up again and become a glacier. So the realities that we're dealing with right now for students who are seniors in the process, I would take note, students who are juniors and even sophomores, because a lot of what we're looking at now will be residual a year, 2, and 3 years down the road. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about changes in instruction. And this is a change that's likely to have lasting effects. Just as there are changes in the way you engage in instruction at Mariemont, there are changes on college campuses, and they started back in March as colleges and universities began to deal with the reality of the coronavirus. So know what you're getting into. Are you going to be dealing with remote instruction? Are you going to deal with shortened academic terms? There are some schools that have the traditional semester program, and instead of doing 2 13-week semesters, they're cutting the fall and the spring into half so that you'll deal with 4 7-week terms that might have 2 courses involved in them. Are you going to be dealing with a hybrid approach, which means that there is going to be remote instruction for some students and on-campus instruction for others? At some institutions, first-year students are coming to the campus for in-person instruction, and the upper-class students are going to be remote. And in other places, first-year students are going to the campus, and they're still remote in many instances. So there are a lot of variations on the theme here that you need to be considerate about. And some are going to try to do the traditional classroom in-class instruction as well. So know what you're getting into, especially if you're a senior applying this year. All the romantic notions you have about what it would be like to be a student at XYZ school have changed. And it might be that they've changed just for this year, but it's likely they will have changed for maybe 2 or 3 years as institutions are going to discover some of the new things that they're doing are going to be kind of cool and they like the way that works. So make sure that you find out what the changes in instruction look like. Then play to your strengths. Play to your strengths. If you're somebody who's very comfortable with being fluid in this process, if it doesn't matter to you whether you're in the classroom, whether you're learning from your couch at home, you need to know that, but don't kid yourself. And then I say this because there will be a lot of you who have for a long time held notions of what it's like. I'm just going to pull a name out of the hat that maybe it's like to go to Northwestern, and maybe that's your favorite school. And I don't care what happens, I'm going to Northwestern. Well, you have a sense of what Northwestern's educational program and presentation would have been like under normal circumstances, but do you want to pay for Northwestern education that is offered remotely? And I don't know, I'm making this up. I'm trying to get you to understand you need to be very discerning about how institutions are presenting themselves. And if it's not working for you right now, if you still would like to have an opportunity to look at that school and be part of that school, but not under the current circumstances, you have options. You can take a gap year. You can apply for admission now, gain acceptance, and once you have an acceptance in hand, you can appeal for a deferral. Ask to take a year off so that you can step back and do other things. Or maybe you don't even apply this year, you just do other things and then you apply a year from now when things might be normalized again. But that's one option for you to consider. And people will ask me, with regard to the gap year, how does that really work? Do colleges really value that? Yes. Interestingly, educationally, pedagogically, institutions see the student who's coming from a gap year experience as coming into their environment as being better prepared, more mature, more thoughtful, having greater focus, greater sense of purpose. Yet, if you decide to apply to an institution with the intent to take a year off, don't tell them that. Don't make that part of your credential. I mean, you might have some great plans about how you're going to use that gap year. Don't write your essay about that, because all of a sudden now you become a low yield candidate for them. They'll see you as somebody who might be amazing, but you're not going to come. And yeah, they're measuring that as well. And finally, you want to take a look at how you might be able to look at alternatives through transfer. Maybe you want to take a year at a local community college or a local state university where you can get some coursework under your belt, but you don't have to pay nearly as much for the uncertainty of what the environment will be looking like at some other institutions. These are all possibilities, but just be very realistic in your assessment of what the styles of instruction are now. In all likelihood, the view book that you have at your house right now doesn't have any of this. And there's a very good chance that a lot of the web content for many institutions doesn't have all of this spelled out just yet. And that's why you have to be asking questions. Ask admission officers, ask faculty, ask students who attend the schools, what's going on? So, quick pause. Again, Amanda, is this generating any thought?
I got a question that I think may have been I think they were thinking about a couple of slides ago, but I'll ask it because it is a good question. So the question is, should a student with a disability, such as ADHD, bring attention to that in their application, especially if they're a high achieving student? And I think the thought is, I have ADHD, I have a disability, but yet I've done well. So is that something they should bring up in their application?
I believe it is. And here's why. Whenever there are irregularities in your program or your performance, maybe you didn't get a grade you felt you deserved, or maybe coursework didn't work out for you, the progression in courses in a particular discipline didn't work out for you, such that it might look strange to somebody who's just getting to know you. Why isn't she taking more rigorous courses, or why did she get a C in her sophomore year? Whenever there are irregularities, you must make sure they're explained. And if you don't make sure they're explained, you're forcing me, the admission officer, to figure it out. And I'll just tell you now, admission officers are, by their very nature, cynics. And when a cynic sees something that doesn't look right, the first inclination is to say, she's just lazy. She doesn't have her act together. She's probably not going to be very well prepared for us. And that might be entirely wrong. Now, where does your question fit in here? Maybe that irregularity is the result of a learning difference. Maybe what we should as an admission committee be looking at is the strength of that student's performance in spite of the challenges of the learning difference. And that's why it's important to reveal that. And that can be revealed in an interview. It can be revealed in a personal statement. The Common Application, in fact, provides an optional essay in which you can address irregularities in your program or performance. And certainly, it would make sense to me to talk to your guidance counselor and say, how can you help us tell this part of the story? So I believe that it's better that you self-disclose than not. And now, there's a question that a lot of families will have is this: well, won't colleges discriminate against him if we talk about that? My question back to you is this: do you really want your son attending an institution that would discriminate against him if he had a learning difference? I wouldn't. The schools that see this information and can factor it into their decision making are going to say this: we like his potential. We see his trajectory. We want to invest in his success because we have the program, the personnel, the curriculum. We can help him make things work. And that's the good fit. And that's why I think it's important to have that conversation. Good question.
Thank you. Great advice.
All right. So the next change that we're going to encounter this year will be changes in access to college campuses. And, if you were lucky and were able to get out and see colleges a year ago, maybe a spring break, a summer vacation, fall break, then you have some experience, some exposure to the physical elements of the campus. But by and large, a lot of students don't have that right now. And you're not going to have it in a normal way for quite a while. So you're going to have to take advantage of virtual tours. And if you haven't done it already, check it out. There's some pretty cool things that colleges are doing. Drones can show you things that you might not see on a normal tour, and the colleges can customize a tour for you with that drone. So I think that you need to avail yourself of the virtual tours as much as possible. Also, virtual information sessions provided by colleges. And if any college or university ever offers you an opportunity to interview with a paid admission staff person, you want to do it. That person is a decision maker, and you always want to have exposure to decision makers. Very important here. So take what they offer you. And Amanda mentioned earlier that I had these conversations with deans of admission, and they were very excited about the kinds of things that their institutions were starting to develop back in the spring to help deliver information in a virtual format to students. They're eager to have the conversations with you. Give them that opportunity. It's not going to be the same as putting your feet on the ground on a college campus, but you should come away with some pretty strong and lasting impressions. You want to communicate with the admission staff person who recruits in your area. This is really important. As you have questions about the admission process or about anything related to the institution, maybe questions about how they're providing instruction on their campus at this time, ask that person. Let that person who recruits in your area be your expert. Now, I want to tell you a quick story that illustrates how this can work. A few years ago, I made a presentation in northern New Jersey. Mom attended without her daughter. And at the end of the presentation, mom went home and said to her daughter, I think I heard Peter say that you should plan to take Spanish again in your senior year. Because it is indeed important that you want to have 4 years of all the major academic groups: math, science, social science, language, and English. And so mom's saying to her daughter, I think Peter said you need to take Spanish next year. And the girl said, Mom, I told you, I'm not going to take Spanish. It's not my favorite. I'm not that good at it. I'm not going to use it in college. They have a big fight. Somehow I end up on the phone with the girl. I didn't ask for it. I mean, they called me, and she's not listening to me either. So I said, how about this? There are probably some colleges you like. Let's put together an email. And I helped her put together a very brief email in which she summarized all the courses she'd already taken. And then she summarized her course options for her senior year. And she summarized the email by saying, I really love your school. I want to make sure that I'm making the right decisions as I plan for my application, et cetera. How would you advise me? Within days, she starts to hear from some of these schools. One of the reps who got back to her is from Boston College. You probably are aware of Boston College, a school very well up on the pyramid. And I'll never forget what the rep said. She said, congratulations. You've done a beautiful job academically. But if you want to be a serious candidate at Boston College, you need to take Spanish next year. I'm sure the girl didn't really like the advice she just got, but consider what just happened. The girl, number one, now is in possession of pretty important information that will help her prepare to be a better candidate. And number two, she started a conversation with a decision maker. How about that? The first person who's likely to handle her application in the admission process is the person who recruits at her high school. And now there's a conversation. And this could continue. Maybe there's another question and another question. And I'm not talking about 20 or 30 questions. I'm talking about meaningful questions that can't be answered anywhere else. But when you have somebody like this that you can reach out to, now you start to develop a relationship. And I want to share with you now why the relationship's important. At selective institutions, there will come a time when admission officers have to make very difficult decisions between great candidates. They'll have great candidates who they've met and great candidates who they've not met. Where do you think their bias will fall? It's human nature. You go with familiarity. Students, you never want to apply to an institution where your credentials will be regarded as coming from a stranger. Strangers are not admitted. I don't care how good you are. Develop the relationships, and that's why this connection with the staff person is important. And it gets better. Research your academic interests online at that institution. A lot of times I'm talking to students and they'll say, I know they have economics because I saw that they have economics. Oh, really? That's nice. What do you know about their economics? In fact, I'll tell you another quick story. I talked with a young man. His name is Aaron. Aaron was interested in economics, and Aaron was a very, very, very smart kid. I mean, the kind of smart who walks in a room and you know he's smart because he's arrogant. He decided to apply early decision to Swarthmore College because he was smart and he figured, I've got the numbers, they're going to take me. They rejected him. Early in January of his senior year, he decided that he gave me a call and he said, I've decided to apply early decision round 2 to Middlebury College, another very highly selective institution in Vermont. And I said, well, that's great. Why are you applying there? It's the next best school on my list, which is not a very good answer for me. So I started to ask more questions. I said, you've been up to see them, haven't you? No. Now, he has 12 days before the early decision deadline. He's ready to apply early decision to make a commitment to school he's never seen. I said, you've got 12 days to get up and see them. I said, do I remember correctly that you're still interested in economics? Yep. What do you know about their economics program? They have one. Again, I'm not very comfortable with this. So I said, while we're on the phone in conversation, let's both go onto the website to see what we can learn about the economics program. And I say this because at colleges and universities, within academic departments, professors will tend to colonize around specific sub-areas of their discipline. And wouldn't you know it, we found that at Middlebury College, the economics professors seem to be really into human sustainability. I said, what do you know about human sustainability? He said, what is it? And this sent up all the alarms in my head. I said, when you go visit, you need to see if you can find somebody to talk to about human sustainability. He did. He did. And he came out of a 2-hour meeting with the professor, and he was so stoked with what he learned, he called me right away and said, I'm so glad you had me do this, because this is really exciting for me. He proceeded to apply early decision round 2, and they rejected him. And it had nothing to do with whether he was smart. It had nothing to do with whether he was a good candidate for them, but it had to do with the fact that they were not convinced that he had a sense of purpose that connected with them. Had he engaged in that kind of online research, looking at the program beyond, yes, they have economics, to understand better what they have and how they offer it and who offers it and who teaches what, had he gotten in touch with those professors back in September or October of his senior year, he would have been able to shape the presentation of his application in such a way that they would have seen the purpose of his application. Instead, they couldn't see it. Check it out. This is something you can do now. You don't have to be on their campus to really come to understand the depth and substance of the academic program, the culture of the academic program. And when you do this research, if you find some professors whose specialties intrigue you, reach out to them. Say, hey, I'm wondering if we can maybe set up a Zoom call because I'd like to ask you some questions. And then you say, what do you teach? Who do you teach? How do you teach? When do you teach? Why do you, what do you like about this? When I come to your school, what would be my opportunities to be on your research team? How can I be involved? How do professors at your school help students who want to reach out beyond your school with internships, summer opportunities, job opportunities, placements into graduate programs? Just talk to the professors about this, get their read on things. You can do this now. Even though you can't get to the campus, you can still collect this information. And you want to prove then, we talked about this earlier, you want to prove then the synergy that exists between you, yourself and the institution. When it comes time to writing those, why do you want to come here essays? Now you got it. There's no mystery. Now you've got it. You can lay it all out for them. So yeah, it's going to be hard to get on their campus right now, but it's not going to be hard to make connections. Again, pause. Amanda, anything coming up in the question box?
This is actually a good time for me to selfishly plug college visits here at Marymount High School. Students do a pretty good job attending, and they're all Zooming in this year instead of course, being here in person. I think the students who have attended would tell you they are really good, and everything Peter said was great. His is more specific, but I think a good place for students to start is coming to the college rep visit here at school. And just getting kind of an overview, and they can ask those college reps any questions that they like as well.
Absolutely. And as I said earlier, college admission officers know that the dynamic of this relationship has changed, but they haven't given up on trying to reach you and give you what you need. And these online visits and presentations at your high school are perfect opportunities to start the conversation, not to stop them, but to start them. And in many ways, this is going to be an outgrowth of the current coronavirus pandemic that is going to have a lasting effect. You're going to have better access to people and information than you had before. So take advantage, especially with the school visits. We good otherwise?
Yes.
Cool. Next one, we're going to talk about changes in assessment. And I suspect for seniors and juniors in particular, this is something that is a big deal because you've been sweating out testing for a while, right? When's the last time before September you were able to take a test? I mean, you might have taken an SAT or an ACT in January or February. March, I think early March in some places is the last time that some students could get access to testing. And then everything else is postponed, canceled, etc. So what's up with that? The reality is colleges recognize that you haven't been able to do what you would normally do. One of the things that I heard consistently in my conversation with deans of admission is we cannot hold students accountable for information that they couldn't produce. If you couldn't produce the kind of battery of tests that you would normally do, we can't hold you accountable for that. So many have made the submission of tests optional. Now notice the number I have in the graphic here, 1,300 institutions. 365 days ago, that number was 1,000. So in the last 12 months, more than 300 institutions, and most of them are in the top of the pyramid, have said, let's experiment with the test option. Let's give students an opportunity to apply without submitting credentials. Now, the reality is colleges know they can make good decisions about whom to admit without test results because they know the best predictor of your success is your work in school. They know they can do that. The tests are helpful in many ways because the tests help them to sort through the volume of credentials. But this year, they're willing to experiment. They're willing to try something different. Here's the rule of thumb, folks. If your super score on the SAT or the ACT is at or below the average for an institution in question, do not send it in. You gain nothing and you will probably hurt yourself. You will introduce a negative bias. Did you hear that? If your score is at or below the average, you gain nothing by sending it in. In fact, the only time your score is really going to be helpful at all is when it pops, when it's suddenly much better than anything that you see on their profile. If you look at that distribution of test results we talked about earlier, if your super score is well above their average, if it's near the top of their distribution, hey, why not? Let it be a credential then. Let it be a credential. But you have nothing to gain otherwise. And I know there's a lot of cynicism about this. People will say, isn't that just a marketing ploy? Aren't they going to assume my scores are low if I don't send them in? You give them too much credit. I was at Franklin and Marshall College when we went test optional years ago. And that period of test option was an absolute delight for us. We could look at young people and make decisions about young people, not test results. At the end of the year, we were curious to know what the scores would have been had students sent them in. we discovered that the average score for the non-submitting student was almost identical to the average score for the submitting student. If you don't send them in, what do we really know? Not a thing. If you want to know more about the test option at different schools, go to fairtest.org. Fairtest.org lists all of the test optional schools in the country in alphabetical order. And not only does it list all of the schools, but it provides these special instructions that each school might offer with regard to, okay, we're not going to require a test option or a submission of tests, but we're going to ask you to submit 2 graded writing samples. We're going to ask you to submit something different. You'll get the specific instructions there. But gosh, this is not a bad year to be a college applicant if you have modest test results, because you can apply to college without them. You can apply to college without. You need to be able to explain your academic progress in light of the pandemic. The last 8 months, dare I say, have been disrupted incredibly for you. The way you learned in February is not the way you learned in March, and it continued to change, right? And now you're back in school, but you got spacing in the classroom, maybe plexiglass. There are a lot of things that are different about the way you learn, but there's still disruptions to the way you learn. Some of you've been doing things remotely, some of you've been in the classroom. Colleges get it. And when you're doing this in the Mariemont bubble, you think, will anybody know? Yeah, there are 24,000 plus high schools around the country, and every student at every school is dealing with the same thing you're dealing with. So right off the bat, admission officers get it. However, what you need to be thinking about as you prepare your application is, how can I help them know how I've dealt with this? So there might be opportunities in interviews to talk about how you've been able to stay focused academically. There might be opportunities in optional essays. In fact, the Common Application will give students this year an opportunity to respond. How has the coronavirus affected you? And by the way, it's not a bad idea to talk there about how it's affected you. And again, I'll never forget what one of the deans of admission said to me about this. He said, there are bound to be a lot of coronavirus essays. We get it. What we're really looking for here is something that's intensely personal from the student, but we're also looking to see, how has the student remade himself or herself? How have you reimagined yourself at a time when you couldn't do anything else? Did you decide to read the classics? Did you decide to take up a new hobby, weaving, cooking, something? I don't know. I'm familiar with a young man who is really into STEM. And he decided with a couple of friends that they would create a mentoring program for elementary school kids, sort of a science challenge for the elementary school kids in their community. And it went well enough that by the end of the summer, this concept had been franchised online to more than 80 countries, schools in 80 countries. So what do you do? How did you respond to the pandemic? Talk to your teachers and letters of recommendation. These are all opportunities for you to make sure that the people who read your application don't make guesses about what's happening in your life. You need to provide documentation about what happened and how you responded and what you continue to do to respond. Now, it's really important here that your recommenders are really on top of your picture. I suspect that if you're a senior right now, you've already asked teachers for letters of recommendation, you've handed over the forms and you've walked away, said thank you, the forms due November, whatever. That's not enough. What you need to do with your recommenders is say, great, I'm glad you can help me. Can we talk? I need half an hour of your time, 40 minutes. And when you get that time with your recommender, you want to make sure they know your plan. Why do you want to go to college? What do you want to study? How do you want to study? Why have you chosen these colleges? And relive with them the moments of excitement you felt in their classroom. As you do that, you help to create a narrative that they can use to tell your story. What you don't want is for them to have to guess about you, to just kind of list superlatives for you, because admission officers get really tired of superlatives. They want to see your story. And when you have this kind of a conversation with the teacher, you're helping them help you, which is really, really integral to your success then as you prepare or present your credentials. Now, you're speaking of story, you've got the interviews. We've talked about that before. My tip for interviews, relax. People aren't trying to hurt you. They're trying to learn about you. Interviewers will carry the conversation. But my big tip is this: be prepared with key talking points. There are probably 2 or 3 things you want to make sure an interviewer knows about you at the end of the conversation. So when the interviewer says something like, well, is there anything else you'd like to share with me? Boom, be ready to talk about something if it hasn't already been discussed. Essays are important too. And the thing I'm going to say about essays, I do 4-hour workshops on essays, so I'm not going to do that right now, but I just want you to know this. With the essay, you want to take the reader to some part of your life experience that won't be visible anywhere else in the application. The application will reveal the facts of your life. The essay should reveal the feelings, should reveal the humanity of you. Frankly, there's a lot going on in the world right now. You're living in an important part of history. What do you think about it? How does it feel? Does it make you happy? Does it make you sad? Does it make you angry? Talk about those things, because that's when you let me know who you are, and it lets me know better what kind of a person you might be on our campus, what kind of leadership you might bring to our campus. And then finally, with assessment, and I kind of didn't have a better category for this, but know where early decision might fit. This is a bit of a conundrum for a lot of families right now, because on the one hand, statistically, applying early decision to a college or university improves your chances of getting in by 20 to 25%. Statistically, it helps. But theoretically, you should not be applying early decision to a college you have not visited. So how are you going to do that? Now, maybe if you're fortunate, maybe you've had a visit earlier. So you're going to have to do as much virtually as you can. But just know, if you apply early decision to a college or university, you're making a commitment. It's not like, well, I'll decide later. I'm going to apply an early decision now. If they take me, I'll decide later. No, you're deciding now. If they take you, you're going to go. So, you just need to be ready in that regard. I normally am somewhat encouraging about early decision, but right now I think it's best to take a step back and make sure that you can honor the fit and honor the commitment in every other way. Again, I'm going to pause, see if I can get a quick drink of water. Amanda, anything showing up?
Yes, an interesting question that I'm happy to help you with, because it's kind of special to Marymount. But the person asks, how does Marymount rank as a school with grades, etc., and how it ranks when they look at students? So I was thinking about, I think they mean, do we look like a strong school and so forth, as well as it might be important to talk about, from your point of view, how do you as college admissions know about Marymount High School and every other high school across the country?
And that's a good question. When I worked at Franklin and Marshall College, we would have between 4,000 and 5,000 applications each year. And those applications would come from approximately 1,800 high schools around the world. Now, one of the things that admission officers will do under any circumstance is invest a lot of time in building relationships with high schools. So we had a pretty good idea of which our feeder schools were, and that's why when we could, we would visit them. And that's why you're having virtual visits from college reps right now. And the college reps want to talk to the students, but they also want to talk to the guidance counselors. And there's a sharing of information, what's new on your end. And that's why guidance counselors are really helpful, can be really helpful in giving students a sense of colleges that would be good fits. But the admission officers are trying to discern the strength of the academic program there as well. When the student applies for admission, the application will be, the student's academic record will be accompanied by a profile that is submitted by Marymount. I'm sorry, I've been calling it Marymount. I apologize. I just heard you say Marymount. Marymount will provide a profile with that application that shows a lot of demographic information about the community, about the school district, but will also detail how the curriculum is organized, and will show the kind of courses that students can take. We'll see that students have access to approximately 20 AP classes, which is pretty cool. We'll know that students who are so motivated can move to a high level of rigor in just about every discipline. We'll also see what students from Marymount have done in the past as applicants. There'll be a list of the colleges that they attend. We'll see what the average test results are for students who have left the school as well at graduation. So we'll have a lot of information about the school before we even look at the student. Now, the part of the question had to do with how does Marymount rank? There are no such rankings. Okay, so kind of get that out of your head. What we want to do is make decisions that are contextual in nature. Contextual, meaning that we understand the learning environment from which the student comes. There are students applying from schools, graduating at the top of their class, the very top of their class, that might have a very difficult chance at a lot of colleges because the school isn't that strong, doesn't have a very good track record, and there's not much evidence that the student's been challenged a great deal. It's just that in that particular environment, the student has risen to the top. And at a school like Marymount, we might be able to look confidently into the third or the fourth decile of the student body to find students who are very well prepared to do the work at our school. So it's going to vary across all the schools. Good question, though.
Thank you. Yeah, I should have had my video on because I was shaking my head yes the whole time you were talking. So let's see. And the next one, oh, okay. If you're counting on institution-specific aid, should you still consider applying early decision? The concern is that the student is accepted but ultimately cannot attend because the financial aid isn't enough to make attendance feasible. Should we just avoid early decision if money is a factor?
Maybe. And I have a specific slide and conversation. I'm going to give you tips about how you can get that information, but that's coming up in about 10 minutes. So we're not far behind that right now, but it's a great question. So important that I devoted a whole slide to that.
Awesome, thanks. Well, I'll let you move on to that.
Cool. All right. Finally, we're looking at changes in financing. Now, as I said earlier, as a parent, one of the things that I always hated was surprises that carry dollar signs with them. And right now, there's not an awful lot you can go to the bank on, literally, in terms of information about college costs. You'll have historic reports about college costs, but you know what? When colleges started to model their response, its instructional response to coronavirus back in March and April, they also started to model the financial implications. So, you know, what would it look like if we went from being 100% in-person traditional instruction in the classroom to being 100% remote education? Do we charge the same amount? Do we charge different amounts? They modeled all that. And unfortunately, there's not much transparency into the models right now. So let's take a look again at what the possibilities are. You could be looking at a range of instructional options that may carry a range of pricing. It's going to be, at some institutions, great variability in the pricing. And some other institutions, they're going to be steadfast and say, whatever you do, whether you come in a hybrid approach, you come full-time remote, you come full-time traditional residential, we're going to charge you the same amount. There's no difference in price. Really? What you need to know as a parent before you allow your child to make a commitment to a school is you need to know what the pricing is going to be for the option that is available to your student for next year or the year after. You need to know what that is so you know what you're paying for. And as I suggested earlier, you might be willing to pay for the full-time traditional residential, but if they're going to charge you the same amount for a full-time remote where your daughter is at home taking classes, how does that work for you? You need to find out what they're going to charge. Explore then the options for a gap year, because if you're not entirely comfortable with the pricing relative to the kind of educational experience your child's going to have, it may just make sense for you to kind of sit out for your child to sit out for a year so that you can wait for things to settle down and there'll be more normalcy in the pricing. Again, clarify the implications. I want to clarify the implications for online and community college credits. And by the way, if you do this, if your child does the community college route, which is fine, you need to make sure that if you have an idea, a good idea, or your child has an idea of the receiving institution after transfer, in other words, the second year, you need to talk with that institution and say, we're going to probably be doing the community college route for a year, and then we're going to be seeking a transfer in for the second year. And a lot of schools will say, okay, we understand, we get it. Then ask the receiving school, can you give us a sense of how you're going to treat the credits from that community college? Don't assume, Don't assume that they're going to take all the credits. Your child might take a full year worth of courses and thinking, wow, I'm going to start as a full-time sophomore at the receiving institution. And that institution may come back to her and say, well, we're not going to take your credit for this and credit for that. And it's too late. There's not much negotiation in that. That's why you want to clarify up front, how these credits will be received if you decide to go with the community college or state university route with the transfer option at the end. Something I want to say here, that especially for the families of seniors, when you complete your FAFSA, we're going to talk more about FAFSA in the College Scholarship Service profile in a few minutes. When you complete the FAFSA, and you can do that now, online, you can go online right now. If you have your 2019 tax return, you can complete your FAFSA now, because that's the data they want to see, 2019 for you. Now, you know what's happened since 2019. You probably were feeling a lot better about where things are financially for you in 2019 than you are through 2020. And how do you communicate that? Well, you don't communicate that to the FAFSA, because the FAFSA is a computer that doesn't recognize human voice. So what you need to do when your student has applied, when your student has applied at a particular institution, and there's a difference between what 2019 is saying about your financial situation and 2020, then you make arrangements to appeal to the institution in question, because the financial aid officers at those institutions are able to exercise professional judgment. And this is a year more than any where they know they have to do it, because things are way out of whack in 2020. Nonetheless, start with the FAFSA as soon as you can, and particularly for seniors. And if you're a junior, you'll be able to start the FAFSA October 1st of the senior year, I'm sorry. But for the juniors, you'll be using the 2020 tax return, which may not line up well with what's happening in 2021. But you can see why I'm suggesting here, you need to be ready to communicate with some documentation to the colleges and universities that shows the changes in your situation. There might be a loss of job, serious health issues, loss of life. There are a lot of things that can come into play in that intervening year between when you submit your tax return and the year that you enter college. So really important that you stay on top of this. Start early and stay on top of it all the way through. Then as the circumstances change, make appeals of the expected family contribution early and often of the institutions in question. I'm going to dive into the financial piece a little bit more, not so that your eyes are going to get crossed and you're going to wonder, whoa, I don't know about that. What I want to do now is share with you a perspective on cost, affordability, and financial aid that may make you feel more comfortable moving forward. So I'm going to hold on questions until I get through this next section, as I think that you're going to find a lot of questions are going to be answered. So if you need financial aid, and maybe you never thought you'd need financial aid, but the way things are looking right now, yep, going to need some financial aid. Let's take a look at who gets how much and why. There are 5 sources of funding for college. 5. You probably can imagine most of them, but here we go. The most important source of funding for college will always be the student's family. Historically in our country, the assumption has been that the family is bearing the first responsibility for paying for college. You can pay for all the college costs, the conversation stops, we're all good. You can't afford it all, then we want to know what your federal eligibility is. In other words, what is your eligibility to bring grant money or loan money from the federal government to the institution in the student's name? And if there's still a need for more, the state government might be kicking in. And then we look at the institution. And then we look at perhaps community-based scholarships. You might have applied for a scholarship from the Daughters of the American Republic, a leadership award from Rotary, the Rotary Club, and maybe there's a $5,000 piece that comes in later. These are the 5 sources of funding for college. Now, before we go further, I want to introduce 2 new thoughts for you. Number 1, when you think about financial aid, you need to think that financial aid is not cash you get. It's not money you get. And I hear students and families saying all the time, we got money from this school. You didn't get money. You got forgiveness of payment. Financial aid is a practice by which institutions help the family find additional funds that come to the institution. The financial aid award will identify additional sources as they're lined out here. So the other thing I want you to think about is this. The financial aid officers that you meet are brokers. It is the job of the financial aid officer to try to maximize the revenue per student in an entering class. So the financial aid officer is looking at your family with this question: how much cash can you deliver to our institution? How much cash can we get from the federal government in your name? You don't get it, it comes to us in your name. How much can we get from the state government in your name? You might have to borrow it, you get to pay it back, but it comes to us. It comes to the institution. Now, the institution doesn't give you cash, okay? The institution might give you a scholarship or a grant. And what does that mean? It just means they're saying, okay, we like you well enough, we're not going to charge you for the balance. That's what it's saying. We're not going to charge you for the balance. We're going to forgive that amount. And then if you get that scholarship from a community-based organization, that's cash to who? No, not you, to the institution. Okay? It might help offset some of what you're expected to pay, but it's still cash to the institution. So the financial aid officer is a broker, and that person is trying to find sources of cash to the institution in your name. Now we see that the family is the first source of cash. So let's take a look at how we can determine your expected family contribution. And it's really pretty straightforward. We can look at your family's income and assets, subtract your family's cost of living, and find out what your expected family contribution will be. Easy, right? Well, it gets complicated. So let's take a look at that. There are going to be two different methodologies that are prominent in the determination of your expected family contribution. The first one we hinted at already, and it is the FAFSA. You need to remember the FAFSA is a federal document. It is not an institutional document. The FAFSA is designed by the federal government to determine whether you are eligible for grants or loans or even work study from the federal government. Each year, the federal government gives each college and university an allowance, funds that it may distribute to students that are admitted to that institution. So the institution wants to know, are you eligible for those funds? Okay. When you complete the FAFSA, which you can do online, it'll be about 18 or 20 data points. You'll need to have your 2000, if you're a senior right now, the family of a senior, you'll need to have your 2019 data IRS return handy. You can complete the FAFSA online pretty quickly. When you complete it, you will get almost instantaneously something that is called a student aid report, SAR. And the student aid report will have an explanation of different things. It will also include a number. This is your expected family contribution. You'll look at that number and you'll think, oh, you might like it, you might not like it, but you'll get used to it. It will be the number that you carry in your head going forward about what you're supposed to be able to pay for college. Every college in the country that wants a share of the federal budget is going to be requiring the FAFSA. State universities will require it exclusively. In other words, they'll use it also to determine your eligibility for support that they administer. Private colleges, especially private colleges in the top third of the pyramid, will also require the College Scholarship Service profile. This refers to institutional methodology. You see, there are about 375 colleges and universities that participate in this College Scholarship Service group, and they agree on certain parameters for the profile. However, each institution is also able to customize the questionnaire that you will complete. Whereas the FAFSA might have 18 to 20 data points, the profile can have as many as 60 or 80 data points. It's a much more granular document. Both of these methodologies are supposed to tell us what your expected family contribution will be. It is rare, exceedingly rare, that the two will come to the same conclusion. In fact, the FAFSA will typically show a lower contribution than the profile. And oftentimes the difference between the two can be as much as $10,000 or $15,000. Now, you can appreciate why that's problematic, because we said when you complete the FAFSA, you get a number. That number's in your head. When you complete the profile, you get nothing. They don't tell you anything. So maybe your student applies to a private college, is accepted, gets a financial aid award, and you're thinking, okay, well, we know what the FAFSA said, but they're expecting $12,000, $15,000 more from us than the FAFSA suggested. How could that happen? Well, they used the profile. You'll notice in the header for this slide, it says inside differential need analysis. That means that private colleges have at their disposal two different methodologies, two different processes to come to a conclusion about what your contribution will be. Here's how it works. If they really, really, really like you, you're going to be one of their best students, they can justify a better financial aid award off of a FAFSA, which shows a lower contribution from you. If they like you, but you're not going to be one of their superstars, they can justify a financial aid award for you that requires a higher contribution from your family. So they can decide behind closed doors what your need is. How about that? That's why you hear people talk about net price calculators. Every college has a net price calculator on its website, and you're supposed to be able to put your data in, and then you'll get a pretty close estimate of what it's going to cost for you to attend that school. Well, if you're looking at a state university, that's probably correct. But if you're looking at a private college, now you should know the question to ask: which methodology do they have loaded up here? They're probably using the FAFSA, which is going to show a better case scenario for you, and will not acknowledge the other scenario. So let's take a look now at figuring out how this can help you. You might have a student who wants to apply early decision, or you have a student who's just extremely excited about a college, and mom and dad, you're sweating every night just trying to figure out how we're going to pay for this. You can ask the institution for an early estimate of your expected family contribution. You can. Even before the student applies for admission, you can ask for the early estimate. And now I'm going to share with you steps to use in doing that. Okay? You start the conversation with the financial aid office. You say, we'd like to get an early estimate of the expected family contribution. And because you can't visit them directly, what you're going to have to do is fax or scan and send as an attached document your 2019 tax return. They will have that. They have on their desktop all the formulas. They can do the need analysis in no more than 10 minutes, probably less. So you have your appointment. They will have had a chance to look at your tax returns and the need analysis. The appointment starts with the financial aid officer saying, we've looked at your information, and this is your expected family contribution, and they give you a number. You say, okay, that's interesting. Which methodology did you use to arrive at this number? That's the first question. Which methodology? And already you're hinting at them that you know more about this process than the average bear, okay? So which methodology did you use to arrive at this EFC? They'll probably tell you they used the FAFSA. Then what you say is, can you tell us which methodology you're going to use when my daughter is accepted? Now you're really putting them on the spot. They know they have to up their game, and they're probably going to do some more number crunching here, and they'll give you another financial aid, an expected family contribution number that is consistent with the profile. And this can be unsettling, because now you see two numbers and they're not very close, and you're thinking, oh, okay, at the very least I've got a best case, worst case scenario here. Next question, you need to ask them what the total cost of attendance will be for your daughter's first year. Now, you can quote tuition, room, and board, and given what we discussed earlier with regard to pricing, there's not much more you can quote even then, okay? So you want to know, given what's going on your campus right now, what is the total cost going to be for the first year? It's not published anywhere, I can guarantee you that. So they're going to tell you. And so you've got now a total cost, and you have a best case, worst case scenario in terms of what you might have to spend, okay? You're going to notice a differential between what you spend and the total cost. The next question is, how are you likely to meet the differential between our expected family contribution and the total cost of attendance? Now you might get some pushback, because they're thinking, you haven't even applied yet. We don't know if we're going to admit you. How do we know? Why should we even have this conversation? Maintain your cool and say this: I understand, but surely you have a template that you use to respond to situations like this. May I see that template? In other words, may I see the financial aid award letter that you would use typically to respond to situations like this? And you know what? If you ask, they must share it with you. They have to. They're not going to volunteer it otherwise, but if you ask, they must share it with you. So now you're going to be looking at a financial aid award letter that might be presented for your student upon acceptance, might be. And you'll see grant, scholarship, loan, work study, loan. Do you think that's important? The next question is this: can you tell me what the projected student loan amounts will be for years 2, 3, and 4? The financial aid award might say that there's a guaranteed student loan of $3,500 for year 1. Don't do the simple math and say times 4, that's $14,000. Because in each year of college, your student will have an increased eligibility for borrowing all the way up to $8,500 the last 2 years. So you could be looking at, your student could be looking at $25,000 to $28,000 in loans at the end of 4 years, which is not horrible. I mean, many people believe that's an amount that can be supported by a salary first year out of college. What's horrible is $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 or more. You want to find out. At the end of this conversation, if you are not comfortable with the numbers you see or the way you're treated, early decisions off the table, because it's never going to get better than this. They are in sales mode. They should be making things as clear and as comfortable for you as possible. But if you're not comfortable with the numbers, you're not comfortable with the way you're treated, you got to pull back. Got to pull back. All right, I'm going to pause here, Amanda, because this is consistent with one of the questions that we had earlier. And there's I think some pretty cool stuff we're going to talk about next. But before we get into it, I just want to see, does this seem to answer the question about getting that early estimate?
I think it probably did. I'll wait and see. Oh, yep. The person said yes in our chat. So good. Thank you. Good.
Thank you. This interactive thing is kind of cool. I'm glad we can do this. All right. So now I'm going to share with you some of the background stuff that might blow your mind. I want to share with you the financial aid matrix. This is a concept that is at work at colleges and universities now. From the very first moment that colleges start to make decisions about who they want to admit to the end of the process when they've sent the decision letters out, they're constantly populating this matrix with information. Notice on the top axis, we can track the student's demonstrated need from no need to high need. And on the side, we have students' desirability from high, medium to low. And frankly, desirability is a very subjective metric here. Some schools will define it as scores and grades, and other schools will say, hey, we like you, you're highly desirable. And by the way, this matrix is simplified for the purpose of this discussion. Many schools, and when I used this, I had 64 cells in the matrix. Okay, so, but that's not important now. What I want you to see is the information we can collect. So look at the upper left corner. You can see that each cell will have the continuing number of students in that cell at that moment. We know the yield, the projected yield on offers of admission for that cell because we have history. We have 10 years of history we can load into this. As a result, we can project then our average expected family contribution, or conversely, the net revenue for that cell. And we also can add in all kinds of academic and ethnic and extracurricular profile information here. This gives us an opportunity to manage our class day to day, what the class will look like and how much it's going to cost us. For example, let's look at the top left corner. Imagine we work for a school that costs $50,000. Imagine that our projected yield on the no-need students is 20%. What will be, we work for a school that costs $50,000. We have 100, I missed the number, I know I was missing one. We have 100 students in that cell now, and the projected yield is 20%. What can we project as our revenue for that cell today, just based on what's in that cell now? $1 million. That's pretty hard cash. We know we're going to get that because history tells us it's going to work out that way. Now, we might change the number of students in that cell. We might change some other things to suit ourselves, but that's the kind of metric that we have at our disposal to manage the class. Now, when I started doing this at my school, we had a rather pedestrian yield on offers of admission, students admitted who would come, of 27%. It was okay, but not great. We wanted it to be better. So we did the research before using this. We found that historically our yield was best here. And logic would tell you why. For the students in that category, the low desirability, we were probably the reach school for them. And in that particular cell, the high need cell, they were getting a lot of financial aid to come. So 2 out of 3 were coming compared to 27% overall. Conversely, the students we wanted most were coming at a rate of 5%. The students who were high desirability and didn't cost anything, would bring full tuition to us, full cost. We were getting 1 out of 20. That was not a very happy scenario. So as we pondered this, we realized that we needed to make some adjustments. In midstream, we made adjustments. We decided we didn't need so many students in the lower right quadrant of our matrix. We decided that what we would do is cut that number in half and strategically redeploy the resources that were now available to the students in other parts of the matrix whom we valued most. Now, please, if that sounds familiar, it should, because remember we talked about the best college for you is a place that values you for what you have to offer. Here it is at work. Here it is at work. This is evidence that colleges are going to be directing the best funding that they have at the students they value most. So if cost and affordability are all important to you, you want to help your child find institutions where they're going to be valued for what they have to offer. At the end of the day, by strategically redeploying, every metric that was important to the institution improved dramatically. We had higher profile academically, better yield, better selectivity, better inclusion of students of different backgrounds. I got a big raise. I mean, it was fun because I was able to manage all of the things that were important to the institution there. This is at work at schools across the country, all the way to the very top of the pyramid. Now, you come out of that matrix, you get a financial aid award. Real quickly, here's some things you need to know about financial aid. There are 2 types of financial aid. Gift aid, which will include scholarships and grants. This is money you don't have to pay back. This is the forgiveness of payment, essentially. But there's important distinctions to be made here. Scholarships are always offered in recognition of some performance element. The most famous scholarships in the country are NCAA Division I athletic scholarships. The premise there is, you come play for us, we won't charge you. Oh, okay, it's a scholarship, but we're not charging you. You don't have to pay. Oh, you decide you don't want to play after a while? We're going to send your parents a bill. No more forgiveness. Performance-based. Maybe it's music, maybe it's theater, maybe it's academic, maybe it's leadership, but there are a lot of performance-based scholarships. You need to perform in order to keep the scholarship. Grants are offered in recognition of need. And that's why you need to complete the FAFSA and or the College Scholarship Service Profile to demonstrate need. And year to year to year in college, you will continue to receive grants as long as you need assistance. If in year 2, you win the lottery, you don't need assistance anymore. Or if you go broke, you need a lot of assistance. This can change. The scholarship piece is not necessarily going to change unless you don't meet the performance parameters. Gift aid. The other part of financial aid is self-help. Here we're looking at student loans, money the student will take out in his or her name, parent loans. By the way, parents can borrow at many institutions up to the total cost of attendance in a parent loan. I don't recommend it, but that's possible. And there's also campus work study. A lot of times we call this the beer and pizza money. This is actually cash that students will get for work they've done on that campus. So that in mind, let's take a look at another practice that colleges will engage in to manage who gets how much and why. Preferential packaging. Now, let's suppose we have a student who has applied to 3 schools, College A, College B, College C. For the sake of simplicity in this conversation, let's assume that each college costs the same, $50,000. Down in the bottom, you see the expected family contribution is the same for each. And the campus work study guaranteed student load is the same for each. No difference there. Whereas it probably will be, but for now, let's just assume no difference. Look at the rest. College A is providing gift aid of $30,000. College B, gift aid of $20,000. And oh, by the way, they're including a parent loan of $10,000. They want more cash, and mom and dad, you got to ante up there. And College C is saying, we're going to make you a presidential scholar, or a gift aid of $15,000. And it's not until you do the math that you realize that they haven't accounted for another $15,000, which, guess what, is going to be your responsibility. Of these 3 colleges, which one values the student most? College A. College A is making it easier for that student to attend. Now, let's flip the script a little bit. Let's suppose that instead of college A, B, and C, we have student A, student B, student C, applying to the same college. Same college. Which is most valued by the institution? Well, student A is getting the best gift aid support. And I would suggest that we see the correlation here between student A and the top line of that matrix, student B, the middle line of the matrix, student C, and the lower line of the matrix. The point I want to make is that the colleges are very intentional about how they treat students according to how they value them, how they read your need, and then how they funnel resources in your direction to make it possible for your student to attend. What do you take from this? Find places that value your student, and this works out really well. College A is going to be there for your student. Now, one more graphic, and I don't want your eyes to blur on this, but this I think is useful here. There are four important sections that I want you to consider. The first section at the top with 1A at the bottom is looking at the total cost of attendance. Let me back up. I developed this about 5 years ago when I met a student, first generation to college student at a public high school in southern New Jersey, student who was just top of his class, great musician, great athlete, and dad worked on the janitorial service for the school. They just didn't have a lot of money. He was the first to go to college. When I met him, he'd applied to 19 schools. He was accepted to 16, and I kind of gave him heck for that because that's entirely too many. But he got into 16, and then he got financial aid. He sent me the financial aid award letters he got from the first 10 schools. Sent them to me, and 5 of them are represented here, college A through E. The actual numbers from the financial aid award. So the first section, 1A, looks at the total cost of attendance. And some schools laid it all out. This is what it's going to cost for tuition, room and board, books, other expenses. College B didn't tell us much of anything. Neither did College C. College C broke out tuition, room and board. So we had to do a little digging to get some of this information. But the bottom line there was we had a total cost of attendance. Then the second section is taking a look at gift aid, financial aid, gift aid. And we're accounting for all the scholarships, the grants. This is the forgiveness of payment section. Section 2B is looking at self-help. And here we're taking a look at the loans and the work study. And you can see that there's a total, the total 2B at the bottom. Now, in the bottom part of the graphic here, and line 3 is going to take a look at the difference between the total cost of attendance and the total financial aid. So we've got part of my screen is obscured here, so I can't give you the exact numbers, but you can see that for college A, the line 4 will show that the difference between the total financial aid, which is $41,470 plus $7,200, or what is that, $48,000, $48,670. That's the total financial aid subtracted from total cost of attendance, means there's about a $4,000 differential, and the family saying, no, it's not too bad. We might have to borrow a little bit, but we can handle that. I pointed out to the family that their total exposure was greater than that. Their total exposure was much greater than that. They were going to have to borrow, about $7,200 or work or borrow to account for $7,200 on top of their $4,000. And that cast that in a different light. But look at college B. College B has a total cost of attendance of $51,740. Look down at the total financial aid. Oh, $51,740. And when the family looked at that, they said, this is like a free ride. We don't have to come up with anything. And by the way, College B is a very, very well-known institution. You would know it instantly by its reputation. I'm not going to mention anything more, okay? But College B is saying this. And I said to the family, let's just slow down a little bit. Let's take a look at how the financial aid is parsed out here. And one of the things we discovered in the financial aid award letter was an item called institutional financing option, $15,340. You know what that is? A loan. It turns out the student was going to have to borrow about $22,000 in his first year. That's crazy. It would only get more than that after his first year. When the family realized what their actual exposure was, they didn't think that was such a good deal after all. Now, college C, D, and E, well, college D is the only private, public institution on the scale here. And you'll see that the state university didn't treat the student any better than the private schools. And I mention this because there's a misperception that state universities cost less and are more accessible financially. That's not always the case. I mean, if you're able to pay everything out of pocket, then yeah, you don't have to pay as much for a state university as you would for a private college. But if there are need factors that come into play, expected family contribution factors with financial need, the state universities are not always going to be the best solution. If you would like this kind of information, check with the guidance office, because I'm making this available online for you. As long as it's unpopulated with any other information, all you need to do is plug in your own data and make the comparisons yourself. As long as you don't change the formula lines, you can use it over and over and over again. But this can really help make clear the distinctions, the out-of-pocket distinctions between institutions that accept your students. So let's race to the finish line. I want to point out again, borrowing is a choice. In fact, any part of a financial aid award is a choice. They're offering you a suggestion about how you can fund. You can choose to accept any part of it or deny any part of it. Borrowing an unreasonable amount is something that you don't have to do. You can go to another institution that's not going to expect you to borrow as much. I see a lot of articles in the spring about students who graduate from college with 100,000 plus in debt, and woe be us. I'm sorry, but that's not my problem. That was a choice you made, and you didn't have to make it. So when you do get a financial aid award, there will be opportunities to appeal. I want to share with you a couple of quick tips. When you appeal, you will always want to appeal with information, not argument. You don't want to approach this conversation with animus. You guys accepted my neighbor's kid and gave her a lot more money, and my kid's better than her. That's not going to win anything. Not going to win anything. And to begin with, financial aid officers can't talk about other kids. They're going to talk about your situation. Present it, documentation, new information, if you want to perhaps persuade the institution to change the amount of financial aid. Present the information in person, if possible. Now, it's not as possible now because of the pandemic. However, if you can have a Zoom conference call to have the conversation, it's always better to make that presentation. The sincerity of your commitment and concern will come through more in person than if you're just doing this by letter. Don't wait to make the appeal. A lot of times families get involved with financial aid. They get a financial aid award letter that doesn't look right. I talked earlier about the differential need analysis, and they just feel intimidated because they don't know what questions to ask. They don't know how to do it. So they put it off. And when they finally do make the appeal, the financial aid office says, you know what, you're right. You do need more assistance, but we don't have it anymore. We don't have any more grant that we can offer you. Get on top of any appeal right away. And by the way, your competitor financial aid awards can be effective in this process. Now, the key word here is competitor. If you're looking at college A and trying to persuade them that the competition is treating you better, you need to show college A financial aid award from an institution that is a true competitor of that institution, not an outlier. So you need to make sure that if you're showing a competitor's financial aid award, that it is actually going to persuade that institution that, yeah, if we want to compete for the student with our competitors, we need to put something better on the table. Finally, some myths about financial aid. Number one, if you've been hearing representatives at colleges and universities make presentations, they will stand tall and they'll say, we meet the full and demonstrated need of every admitted candidate. We meet 100% of the need of every candidate. I'm sorry, but it's not possible. Think about what needs to happen in order for that to be possible. In order for that to be possible, it means that the institution must be in full agreement with every family on the determination of that family's expected family contribution. How do you think that's going to work out? It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It's a nice idea. It's just part of the marketing. It's the rhetoric that you're going to hear. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. The other myth is this. Colleges will say we're need blind, very, very solemnly. We're need blind in the admission process. Again, doesn't happen. It's a noble idea, but it's functionally impossible. And here's why. Colleges and universities must provide to the federal government every year an operating budget that proves to the federal government that that institution is indeed nonprofit. They're not bringing in more money than they put in program. If they bring in more money than they put in program, they got a profit. So we're constantly trying to make the lines meet. And when we provide that operating budget, guess what is the most, or perhaps the largest line item? Financial aid, scholarship. Now, do you think the federal government will be at all forgiving of an institution that says, well, we're not sure if we're going to be spending 150 million or 250 million in financial aid? And frankly, that's what need blind means. Need blind means we're just going to spend, and we don't care about how much it is. The reality is there will be a fixed financial aid budget for every institution. And when there's a fixed financial aid budget, there will be accountability. Please don't worry about this. Please don't worry. Every institution will have an amount of financial assistance that it can offer to students. And who gets the money? Remember, think about fit. The best college is the place that will admit you, give you what you need, and demonstrate how it will invest in your success. Find places that are good fits, and it won't matter. This need blind thing won't matter. This demonstrated, meeting the full and demonstrated need of every candidate won't matter. They'll take care of you. They'll take care of you. This is all eyewash. I think that I've gotten to the end of what I need to say. So if it's okay with you, we'll pause one more time and see if there are any questions.
Yes, there is a great question. Do you think that a college will be less likely to accept you if you are pushing them for financial information? If you are willing to pay the full amount without any financial aid, does that give you any more chance of getting accepted?
Based on what I just said, with regard to need blind and so on, based on what I said with the financial aid matrix, the fact that you can pay gives you an extra credential. It is not a guarantee of anything. But let me add an additional observation about this year. College administrators have two big worries right now. Worry number one is that in accommodating the changes in academic program to suit the COVID situation, they're taking a big financial hit. Colleges are losing between $100 and $200 million this year. Even the wealthy ones losing a lot of money. Keep that in mind. The other thing that's problematic for colleges is this. The metrics that we have used for years, 30 to 40 years, to predict who's going to apply, who's going to come if we accept, all those metrics are gone because the things we've done in the past, the visits to high schools, the college fairs, the college nights, the interviews on campus, all the predictive analytics are out the window. And so as a result, admission officers are going to be inclined to over-admit this year. If they admitted X last year, they're going to admit X plus a factor this year. I'm not saying they're going to double their number, but probably 10% more because they don't want to risk coming short in the class. And when they do that, they're most likely, when they over-admit, they're going to admit into the margins, further into the margins of their applicant group for students who don't need financial assistance. That doesn't mean they're going to discriminate against kids who need assistance because they will try to restore or maintain the financial assistance that they would normally offer to kids who need assistance. But my point is that if they want to become solvent again in a year hence, they're going to be taking more students who can pay now to generate the revenue that will help them later on. So, I don't feel comfortable that I say this, but it's true that there's students who might not have had the slam dunk capacity at some institutions in admission in the past, have a better slam dunk capacity, especially if they can afford to pay this year. And that might only be a one-year phenomenon, but it's going to be out there for more kids than we might imagine. The fact that you can pay is going to help. The fact that you may need assistance, and I want to point this out too, Amanda, a lot of folks get concerned when they fill out the admission application. The admission application will say, tell us now, are you going to be a candidate for financial aid? Yes or no? And people get really worried. Say what you need to say there. If you're going to be applying for financial aid, do it. Say yes. Colleges will not discriminate on that question. They will not discriminate on your intent to apply for financial aid. They might discriminate later when they see all of your academic record and all of your financial record, and then they're going to put it in the matrix and they're going to figure out where you fit. But the fact that you say I'm applying for financial aid, they're not going to discriminate. Why? They know historically that a third of the students who say I'm going to apply for financial aid will either never apply because they know they don't need it, or they do apply for financial aid and they demonstrate that they don't need it. So to discriminate on that particular check in a box makes me a fool. I won't do that. I don't know if that got at the question or not, but it gets complicated. I understand.
I agree. It's a tough one, and I absolutely agree. I think it's just going to be another unprecedented year, another unprecedented item that we're dealing with this year with regard to admissions. So I got another question here. How will deferrals affect admission for the next couple of years?
That's a very popular question because families of students applying this year are worried that students who may have deferred from last year and will then start in the fall of 2021 will affect the ability of an institution to take in new students. Everything I'm hearing suggests that A, there haven't been as many deferrals as you'd imagine, but B, consider what we just said about over-admitting. If there's ever a year when a school is going to risk taking more students than fewer students, it'll be this year. In my opinion, the deferrals from this last year are not going to have a material impact on the chances of students who are applying straight up next year.
That's kind of what I'm hearing too from college reps. So next question, how can we best find what scholarships each school offers and what it's based on? Or how can we figure out which schools will value our kid?
Those are two different questions. To begin with, the scholarships that institutions award should be pretty well enumerated in the financial aid section or the admissions section of their websites. You can check that out. And I'm going to throw this back to you, Amanda, because it's probably the case that you have a pretty good record of which schools offer scholarships, which ones don't. And over time, you know the size of scholarships that are awarded. Some schools do sort of a nominal scholarship just to say, we like you, and others will give you some big scholarships. So the guidance department will have a lot of good information that way. What was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
How can we figure out which schools will value our kid?
Again, I think your college advisors are in a position to help you with that. They can't give you foolproof information, but because of the relationships that they've developed with colleges and universities over time, they know the profile of students who are likely to get in, not likely to get in, likely to be treated as top scholars. So I would start there. But the other thing, here are a couple of other tips for you. I would suggest that you try to subscribe to the student newspapers on college campuses. They're often free and they're almost all online. And the student newspapers will carry weekly or monthly stories about what's important on that campus, including faculty meetings and board of trustee meetings that discuss policy issues. And that's where you might be able to discern what the hot button issues are for that institution at that particular time. So I would say that that's another way to approach this.
Wonderful. Let's see. What are some of the standout trends that you have seen with students?
Standout trends. I'm not sure in terms of how students make themselves stand out.
That's what I'm guessing the person means.
Oh, okay. Let me take a shot at that, and I hope I'm answering your question. Authenticity is really important. You talk to admission officers at selective institutions, they'll tell you the importance of taking good courses and getting good grades and presenting yourself in a holistic manner, but they also want to see the real you. So the students who, and I'm going to go back to the essay for a moment, the students who are willing to take some risks in revealing themselves, the student, there's a safe presentation and there's a chancier, riskier presentation. And my experience is that when you take a good risk and you make it work, what you're saying to the institution is you have the level of confidence to step up into a highly competitive environment. Risk takers do that. I mean, if you're risk averse, you're not going to be terribly confident, and they're going to sniff that out in an instant, and they're not going to take you. So you need to be honest about who you are and what's important to you. And that's why I said earlier, there's so much going on in the world right now. So oftentimes students will say, I know I can compete academically at a particular school, but I don't know how to set myself apart. My response to the student is, you're looking in the wrong place. You're looking at your academic record and your extracurricular profile. You need to be looking in here to understand what you think, how you think, why you think. And maybe your thought process extends beyond your school environment, even your community. Maybe there, as I said before, maybe there are things that really bother you or things that make you very excited. Try to get your arms around that. And I'd like to give an example, and I hope I'm going in the right direction here. I've had an opportunity to talk with a young woman who's really bright this fall, and I really enjoy working with her because she's a beautiful writer. I mean, I haven't seen many high school students write as well as she writes, and she does it easily. And she's of Mideastern background. So her first draft of her essay was about how she finds a certain release in cooking. She loves to cook traditional dishes from her family comes from Iran, and she and her grandmother would cook this or that, and she evokes the aromas of the kitchen, and it was very creative, very well done. And I'm reading this, I'm thinking, this is a good essay, but given the schools that interest her, it's not going to separate her from her peers. It's not letting the reader know much more about her than what her background is. And we had a number of conversations because I had to kind of tease out of her what she really cared about. And I saw in that essay, it was a line about 2/3 of the way through. She said, being in this environment takes me away from other concerns. You know, the problems at my school, the problems in my community, the problems in the world. But there's something going on here. And it took a number of conversations before I finally was able to get her to talk about what made her mad, what made her angry. She attends a private school in Maryland. And that's not terribly consequential, but in some ways it provides some context. She's the student body president. And over the last year, there have been a number of assemblies during which students could help to present themselves, educate others about differences, ethnic differences, gender issues, all that sort of thing. And apparently there were two young men who made themselves vulnerable in front of their peers and were greeted with bullying, a lot of name-calling, castigation. I mean, their lives just kind of turned upside down. They committed suicide. And very tragically, that was it. They just suicide. And this young woman has been carrying the hurt of that because she feels she let them down. That as a leader in the school, she didn't recognize what was going on, or she recognized it and didn't act quickly or resolutely enough to help them. And she also felt that the administrators within the school didn't step up to help as much. And as she was sharing this with me, I mean, she was teary-eyed as she's talking about this. And it's not like these were two close friends, but they were still good acquaintances. I said, why don't you try a different approach? Why don't you write an essay as though you're writing a letter to your departed friends? Let them know how you feel, what's on your mind. It didn't take her long. Within a week, she came back with an essay that was incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful, and it spoke from the heart about what had happened and the regrets that she had, but also the resolve that she has now not to ever let it happen again. And I mean, to read it brings a tear to your eye. I mean, it really does. But the point that I make here is that she revealed a part of her that even she didn't recognize was valued in this process. And the schools that she's applying to are going to look at her with some real anticipation as here's somebody who's a leader. Here's somebody who's going to make other people think beyond their nose on different topics. And it was interesting. Subsequently, members of her community read her essay. Her English teacher read the essay, and I guess kind of gently tried to coax her back to the cooking essay. because, it's like good girls, you're a good girl. You don't want to mess up your image here. Why don't you do the safe thing? And fortunately, this young woman gets it. She understands what it means to really reveal what's in her heart. And she has no regrets about the approach she's taking on. So you ask what's important. I think kids that can do that help themselves greatly, because that's when they look in here for the answers to what sets me apart.
Yes, excellent point.
Mm-hmm.
I know, and I find sometimes that's definitely difficult for adolescents to do.
Mm-hmm.
Is to look inside and do that. It takes a lot of self-reflection and a lot of time and a lot of patience for them. But
right.
Well, Peter, I don't see any other questions in our chat, and this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge and great stories and tidbits too. So we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been fun, and I hope that there's something that folks can take away from this. And again, if they're interested in that financial aid comparison worksheet, now you're on the spot for that, but I'll make sure that you have that to distribute as you wish them. Thank you again, and best wishes to everybody as your year continues.
Oh, thanks so much. Take care.
All right. Good night.
Good night, everyone.